Jai Hind to all of you. I am Updesh Kumar Jaiswal, working as an assistant professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College, Ghaziabad. Today, I am going to presenting a lecture on the topic Introduction and Basic Information about Indian Constitution. This topic is related to the subject Constitution of India, Law and Engineering, KNC 501 subject code. The outline of today's lecture: meaning of the Constitution, definition and elements of the constitutionalism, Government of India Act of 1935, features of Government of India Act of 1935, Indian Independence Act of 1947, silent feature of Indian Independence Act of 1947, enforcement of the Indian Constitution, characteristics of the Indian Constitution, the preamble to the Indian Constitution, meaning of the fundamental rights, 6 fundamental rights of Indian Constitution, features of the fundamental rights written in the Indian Constitution, fundamental duties in India, and finally references. Meaning of the Constitution. A constitution is primarily a set of rules and principles specifying how a country should be governed, how power is distributed and controlled, and what rights citizens have. A constitution is a ruling document within a country that defines the specific rule and behavior to govern and run the country. A constitution is a set of fundamental legal political rules that are binding on everyone in the state, including ordinary law-making institutions, concern the structure and operation of the institution of government, political principle, and right of the citizen. It is based on widespread public legitimacy, are harder to change the ordinary law. A 2/3 majority of vote or referendum is needed in order to change anything. As a minimum, meet the internationally recognized criteria for a democratic system in terms of representation and human rights. Definition of constitutionalism. It is a very important term to understand. It refers to the act that defines that a country or state should be governed by specific rules or ruling document that is called as the Constitution. It is a mechanism that provides validity to a democratic government. It states that politicians or government leaders should operate strictly according to the Constitution. The different elements of these are written constitution, independent judiciary, judicial review, rule of law, separation of powers, free and fair election, responsible government, fundamental rights, federalism, decentralization of the power. These are the different elements. Government of India Act of 1935. It was passed by the British Parliament in August 1935. It was the longest and enacted by the British Parliament at that time. It was divided into 2 separate acts, namely the Government of India Act 1935 and Government of Burma Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 derived material from 4 key sources. The first source is report of the Simon Commission. Second source is the discussion at the third round table conference. Third resource is the white paper of 1933. And the final and fourth is the reports of the joint select committees. This act ended the system of diocese introduced by Government of India Act 1990. It provided for creation of 1919. It provided for creation of a Federation of India. However, the federation never came into being as the required number of princely states, Riyasat, did not join it. In Hindi, princely states are called as Riyasat and they did not join it. Features of the Government of India Act of 1935. Abolition of regional diversity and introduction of diversity at center. Abolition of Indian Council and introduction of an advisory body at its place. Provision for an all India federalism with British India territories and princely states. Elaborate safeguards and protective instruments for minorities. Supremacy of British Parliament. Increase in size of legislature, extension of franchise, division of subject into 3 lists, and retention of communal electorate. Separate of Burma from India. This was the very important feature. Now, Indian Independence Act of 1947. The Indian Independence Act, enacted and adopted by British Parliament, receives royal assent on 18th of July 1947. The Indian Independence Act creates 2 new independent dominions. First is India for the Hindu people and second one is the Pakistan for the Muslim people. The provinces which were formerly administrated directly by the British are attached to one or other of these 2 states depending on whether the majority of the population is Hindu or Muslim. The princely states are freely Riyasat are free to decide whether they belong to Pakistan or India. The decisions are taken by that princely state. India obtained its independence on 15 August 1947. Some silent feature of Indian Independence Act of 1947. It provided for 2 dominion states, India and Pakistan. The authority of the British Crown over the princely states ceased and they were free to join either India or Pakistan or remain independent. The Constituent Assembly of both the states were free to make constitution of their respective countries. British government would not continue any control on any dominion neither on India nor on Pakistan. The Governor General was invested with sufficient powers until March 1948 to issue order for effective implementation of the provision of the Indian Independence Act 1947. Those civil servants who had been adopted before the 15th August 1947 will continue in service with same privileges. These are the important and silent features of the Indian Independence Act of 1947. Now, enforcement of the Indian Constitution. The Constitution of India came into force on 26 January 1950. On that day, the Assembly ceased to exist, transferring itself into the Provisional Parliament of India until a new Parliament was constituted in 1952. So, Provisional Parliament were used. The date of 26 January was selected as a historical day because on this day, Purna Swaraj Day was celebrated in 1930. Some provisions of the Constitution pertaining to citizenship, elections, provisional parliament, temporary and transitional provisions came into force on November 26, 1949 itself. The remaining provisions, the major part of the Constitution came into force on January 26, 1950. This day is referred to the Constitution as the date of its commencement and celebrated as the Republic Day. With the commencement of the Constitution, the Indian Independence Act of 1947 and the Government of India Act 1935, with all enactments amending or supplementing the latter act, were repealed, stopped. The abolition of Privacy Council Judicial Act 1949 was, however, continued. These two acts were stopped, repealed, but this act was continued. Characteristics of the Indian Constitution. It is very important point to understand. The silent features, characteristics of the Indian Constitution are written Constitution, lengthy document, drawn from different sources, a federal polity with a unity bias, single citizenship, more flexible than rigid, democratic republic, balance between judicial supremacy and parliamentary sovereignty, universal adult franchise मताधिकार, secular state धर्मनिरपेक्ष. Written constitution is the one which you can get in the form of a book and can be read. In starting, there were 395 articles, 12 schedules, and it has been divided into 22 parts. But in the current time, the constitution consists of a preamble, 22 parts containing 448 articles, 12 schedules, 5 appendices, and 108 amendments till date. Second important constitution is the detailed constitution. The Indian constitution is the longest and the most detailed in the worldwide. A detailed list of fundamental rights from Article 12 to 25 is included in Chapter 3 of the Constitution. The Chapter 4 from Article 35 to 51, a detailed list of directive principles of state policies also included, which are guidelines of the state in policy making. From Article 350 to 360, the emergency powers. The emergency power of the President has also been included in it. A detailed description of center-states relations is given in Chapter 11 and 12 of the Indian Constitution. Preamble. A preamble, in Hindi we can say as prastavna, uddeshika, is an introductory statement in a document that explains the document's philosophy and objective. In a constitution, preamble presents the intention of the framers, the history behind its creation, the core values and principle of the nation. The preamble basically gives idea of the following: source of the constitution, nature of nation's state, statement of the objective of a constitution, date of its adoption. These 4 points will be covered in any preamble. Now, the preamble to the Indian Constitution. The idea of preamble to Indian Constitution were given by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly on January 22, 1947, in year of 1947. The preamble states the objective of the Indian Constitution, and it is useful in the interpretation of articles when language is found ambiguous. Components of preamble to the Indian Constitution. It is indicated by the preamble that the source of authority of the Constitution lies with the people of India. Preamble declares India to be a sovereign, socialist, secular, and democratic republic. The objectives stated by the preamble are to secure justice, liberty, equality to all citizens, and promote fraternity, are to maintain unity and integrity of the nation. The date is mentioned in the preamble when it was adopted, that is the November 26, 1949. In next slide, I am showing the preamble to the Indian Constitution. It is mentioned in English, and in this side it is mentioned in Hindi. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, and political, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. In our Constituent Assembly, this 26th day of November 1949, do hereby adopt, enact, and give to ourselves this Constitution. So this is written in the preamble of India. I read it. Key words in the preamble to the Indian Constitution. We, the people of India. It indicates the ultimate sovereignty of the people of India. Sovereignty means the independent authority of the state, not being subject to control of any other state or external power. Sovereign, Prabhutva Sampann or Swatantra. The term means that India has its own independent authority and it is not a dominant of any other external power. In the country, the legislature has the power to make laws which are subject to certain limitations. Socialist, Samajwadi. The term means the achievement of socialist ends through democratic means. It holds faith in a mixed economy where both private and public sector coexist side by side. It was added in the preamble by 42nd Amendment 1976. Secular, Dharma Nirpech. The term means that all the religions in India get equal respect, protection, and support from the state and government. It was incorporated in the preamble by 42nd Amendment 1976. Democratic, Jantantraत्मक. The term implies that the Constitution of India has an established form of constitution which gets its authority from the will of the people expressed in an election. Republic, the Hindi meaning is Ganraj. The term indicates that the head of the state is elected by the people. In India, the President of India is the elected head of the state. This is the preamble of Constitution written in English language. And preamble to the Constitution of India in Hindi language. In Hindi, preamble is called as the उद्देशिका. हम भारत के लोग भारत को एक संपूर्ण प्रभुत्व संपन्न समाजवादी पंथ निरपेक्ष लोकतांत्रिक गणराज्य बनाने के लिए तथा उसके समस्त नागरिकों को सामाजिक, आर्थिक और राजनीतिक न्याय, विचार, अभिव्यक्ति, विश्वास, धर्म, उपासना की स्वतंत्रता, प्रतिष्ठा और अवसर की समता प्राप्त कराने के लिए तथा उस सब में व्यक्ति की गरिमा और राष्ट्र की एकता और अखंडता सुनिश्चित करने वाली बंधुता बढ़ाने के लिए दृढ़ संकल्प होकर अपनी संविधान सभा में आज तारीख 26 नवंबर 1949 ईस्वी मिति मार्क्सिस्ट शुक्ल सप्तमी संवत 2006 विक्रमी को विधत द्वारा इस संविधान को अभिलिखित, अधिनियमित और आत्मर्पित करते हैं. So it is all about the preamble of Constitution of India. Now, fundamental rights. So what is the meaning of fundamental rights which are mentioned in the Constitution of India? Fundamental rights are a set of basic human rights that are guaranteed to every citizen of a country to ensure their dignity, freedom, and well-being. The fundamental rights are always included in a constitution because they are considered essential for the development of the personality of every individual and to preserve human dignity. Fundamental rights are also essential for the protection of individual freedom and act as a check on the power of the government in a country. Fundamental rights which are given Article 40 to 35 Part 3 of Indian Constitution. In India, fundamental rights are arranged in Part 3 Article 40 to 35 of the Constitution. Fundamental rights are the basic human rights mentioned put together in the Constitution of India which are guaranteed to all citizens. It is arranged in the Part 3 from Article number 14 to 35 of the Indian Constitution. They are applied without discrimination on the basis of race, religion, gender, caste, etc. So there is no discrimination. The Indian Constitution offers all citizens individually and collectively some basic freedoms. These are guaranteed in the Constitution in the form of 6 broad categories of fundamental rights, which are justifiable. Fundamental rights are enforceable by the courts subject to certain conditions. These rights are called fundamental rights because of 2 reasons. They are mentioned in the Constitution which guarantees them. They are enforceable by court. In case of violation, a person can approach to court. Fundamental rights of Indian Constitution. Originally, the Indian Constitution provided 7 fundamental rights, which have now been revised to 6 fundamental rights, which are as follows. The first fundamental right is right to equality, and it is mentioned in Article number 14 to Article number 18. Second fundamental right is the right to freedom. It is mentioned from Article number 19 to 22 in the Constitution of India. Third fundamental right is the right against exploitation. Fourth fundamental right is right to freedom of religion, and it is mentioned, it is written from Article number 25 to 28 of the Indian Constitution. The fifth fundamental right is cultural and educational right. Right to constitutional remedies, which cover in the Article number 32 to 35 of the Indian Constitution. The right to property was delayed. The right to property was deleted from the list of fundamental rights of the Constitution by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978 and made a legal right under Article 300A in Part 12 of the Indian Constitution. These are the different fundamental rights and what are the articles used and which article represent. It is represented in the tabular form. Right to equality from Article number 14 to Article number 18. Right to freedom, Article number 19 to Article number 22. Right against exploitation, Article number 23 and 24. Right to freedom of religion, Article number 25 to Article number 28. Cultural and educational rights, Article number 29 to Article number 30. Right to constitutional remedies, Article number 32 to Article number 35. Features of the fundamental rights written in Indian Constitution. Fundamental rights can be amended by the parliament by a constitutional amendment, but only if the amendment does not alter the basic structure of the constitution. Some of the fundamental rights are available to all citizens, while the rest are for all persons, citizens and foreigners. The fundamental rights of Indian Constitution can be suspended during a national emergency. But the rights granted under Article 20 and 21 cannot be suspended at any case. The application of fundamental rights can be restricted in area that has been placed under martial law or military rule. All people, irrespective of race, religion, caste, or sex, have been given the right to move the Supreme Court and the High Court for the enforcement of their fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are very important because they form the backbone of the country. They are essential for safeguard the people interest. All laws, ordinance, orders, regulation, notification, etc. that are violate of fundamental rights shall be void. We should also perform fundamental duties. I am here presenting 11 fundamental duties to be obeyed by every Indian people. So, what are the fundamental duties? I am going to discuss: to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions, the national flag and the national anthem. To decorate and follow the noble ideal which inspired our national struggle for freedom. To uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of India. To defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. To promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of the India. To value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. To protect and improve the natural environment including forest, lakes, rivers and wildlife, and to have grace for living creatures. To develop the scientific nature, humanism, the spirit of investigation and improvement. To safeguard public property and to stop violence and respect to women. To strive towards excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity so that nation constantly rise to higher levels and effort and achievement. Provide opportunity for education to his child or ward between the age of 6 and 14 years. So these are the fundamental duties which should perform by the every citizen of the India. These are the different references which I have used to make this lecture, to deliver this lecture, to present this lecture. 3 websites, 4 textbooks and 3 journal papers were used by me. Thank you and Jai Hind.